Hi, I'm Casey Mraz, and welcome to the Lawyer Mastermind podcast, where we help attorneys who are serious about growth learn strategies to supercharge their firm. Today, I'm very grateful to be joined by Yani Smith from Legal Intake Pros. Thanks for joining me today, Yani.
Thanks, Casey. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we're so glad you could join us. And just to give a little background, Yani is an esteemed intake consultant. Well, I guess you started, though, at a law firm, a major law firm. And then you also had kind of a rich background in creating the Intake Accelerator program. So, to kick things off, could you tell us a little bit about your journey from working at a personal injury firm to now as an intake consultant, assisting law firms in optimizing their intake processes?
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks so much, Casey, for that kind introduction. I am the founder of Legal Intake Pros, and what we do essentially in a simplified description is we help law firms remove the bottlenecks in their intake systems so that they're able to convert more leads into open cases. And my own personal journey started off working at a high volume personal injury firm here in Charleston, South Carolina. So I live in Charleston. And when I started in the firm, I was tasked with managing the intake department and the marketing for the firm. We did a lot of TV, a lot of billboards. The firm had been around for over 100 years, great lawyers, great reputation. But the law firm really grew and its history came from referrals for many, many years. And when I started, it was, I believe, 2016, and the firm had just started digital marketing. Maybe we're a couple years into digital marketing. So we went from that warm lead system to that cold lead system that required more pursuit and chase. And what I experienced was that even though our leads were increasing and increasing, the number of cases were not necessarily reflective of the increase in leads. So I really went through a long period of time of the trial and error and trying to figure that out, and often would call our digital marketing vendor. So I was that client calling you, Casey, saying we need more
Uh-huh.
leads going on with our SEO. But later realized after switching from looking at our marketing reports to our rejected and audit cases that all roads led back to the intake system. And that's when we started to really pivot and take a look internally. But from there, after having the privilege of being able to optimize the intake for this firm, we went from one intake team member to, I believe we were at about 4 or 5. 5 years later, we had massive growth. And I was very passionate about helping other firms, and later joined an agency where I built an intake optimization program, which essentially is just to help law firms, right, optimize their intake systems to remove all the friction. And since then, I've been focused on helping those firms and recently launched Legal Intake Pros almost 6 months ago. And right now, we're focused primarily on personal injury law firms at the moment.
Okay, awesome. Well, congratulations. That sounds like a really exciting journey. And you've touched at this point a lot of different law firms working with them to help improve their intake systems. Is that right?
Yeah, yes. We've helped law firms across the US, and I've worked with different types of practice areas, but recently have just refined it to just focus on personal injury at the moment.
Okay, got it. And I think there's a lot to unpack it in what you started off with there. And I want to touch on a couple things. One of them being bottlenecks. You said that
Yeah.
there's, firms run into these bottlenecks. What do you see there? How can firm owners identify these?
Yeah, and it's, the bottlenecks in the firm are one, usually not intentional, right? We don't want these bottlenecks to be here. They're kind of they're going to grandfathered in, right? Because for a very long time, the firm didn't really maybe need an intake department because maybe they weren't advertising online. The attorneys were able to handle it. So as they've transitioned into adopting other advertising tactics and expanding their marketing in order to stay competitive, there are more leads. So the attorneys are more busy, the paralegals are more busy, there's more cases, the receptionists as well. So one of the common bottlenecks that we see is an attorney-centered intake system where every single case has to be kind of approved and signed off by an attorney in order to sign the case up. And yes, there are cases such as maybe something more nuanced or complex, like a premises liability or a medical malpractice that absolutely needs an attorney to review that case. But even then, it should still be pre-screened by a member of the intake team that's trained and empowered, knows what questions to ask, is aware of the criteria for that firm or the threshold limits for that firm, and then pass it on to an attorney. But there are other case types, maybe like a clear car accident case where the liability is clear. We've got the injuries, this within the statute of limitations. We understand the treatment that the intake specialist should be able to identify and sign that case up versus waiting 2-3 days for the attorney to get back to them. And by that moment, that prospective client has already signed up with another firm. So that's one very common bottleneck that we see. And another is really just due to a lack of systems. So the bottleneck is the manual labor that's required to follow up when it's not automated. That's a huge bottleneck, is if you're having to type out every single follow-up email for a prospect that you're chasing, and or every single text message, or map out every field of an agreement every single time you're sending out a sign-up packet. That bottleneck is the time from all that manual labor that could be automated. So those are the two most common that we see. And of course, we all know about just answering the phones, right? And having to play
Hmm.
phone to clients and missing calls. But I would identify that more as probably another area of friction. But those two are the most common. And the way that a law firm can identify those is simply looking at their numbers, looking at their leads, and finding out, focusing less on the cases that we signed up and looking at those that we did not sign up. Why did we lose these cases? What could we have done differently? Listen to the calls. How many times did we follow up? How long did it take for us to get back to them? Where did we include friction that could have otherwise been eliminated, maybe through training and investing some time and systems into the entire process? So those are some common bottlenecks that we see and that we help with, that again are not intentional. Sometimes a lot of the firms just don't know better, and again, a lot of these bottlenecks are kind of just grandfathered in, coming from that like referral based system.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because we've worked with a lot of firms and continue to work with firms that their whole business was based on referrals, and that is great.
Yeah.
But as they've grown, they do need to kind of expand their network and think about other channels for marketing. And then they, get with digital marketing. But they are approaching it, from my experience anyway, a lot of the old way. And so I want to touch, because you said some really good nuggets of information there. And one of them that I picked up on was answering your phone or contacting. What's like the number? Is there a magic number of, let's say a firm gets a new lead? How many times should they contact them? Should they just call them once and then done if they don't answer? Or
I mean, it really depends on your practice area. I think that there are certain practice areas, such as obviously personal injury, right? They're going to need someone to contact them as soon as possible. If it's if it came from an online source, we're talking about an outbound call. With we always say, if there's someone in the office, if there's someone working, if there's someone in the after hours, within minutes, the minute that web form comes in, the next available agent needs to be contacting that prospective client for a personal injury, wanted lead. If someone is calling into the firm, they should be answering that call as soon as possible. I know that often, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of calls too, that it's ringing for over 30 seconds, 45 seconds. Patience is low these days, and people are going
Mhm.
to hit the phone. They're going to call another law firm. So we try to set up the system so the phone is being answered on the second ring. Of course, there are other practice areas. This doesn't apply to all law firms. Maybe like an immigration law firm or even a family law firm can extend that range a bit more, where it's not as competitive with as such as a personal injury law firm. But definitely, I would say that once we try to get a hold of the potential client and they did not answer, we also need to use judgment, and we use a scoring system. So based on the what is provided, if it is a wanted case, we're following up daily, at least for 2 weeks. We're texting, we're emailing, we are doing it in a very personable way. It doesn't seem like just this, just automated sequence. It's very personable to them, to their situation, and that still can be automated. And of course, if it's a case that it's clearly one that the firm is probably going to refer out or reject, we're not following up as much, but we still want to try to get a hold of them to point them in the right direction so that they still have a great experience with the firm and that they feel like we were still attentive to their needs and we wanted to help them, even if it's not us. We still want to get you to someone that can help. So the
Hmm.
point is sure that everyone is receiving a remarkable experience, regardless of the value of their case. So that's what we would recommend in that case.
That's funny because somewhere along the way, some of the firms that we spoke to, they got away from, to call it real business stuff, like, being personable or, being nice to people for in some cases, unfortunately. But you touched on something that I think people have a disconnect from, and that is automation plus
Mm-hmm.
personalization. I think a lot of us, we've all seen bad examples of automation. So I think if you're not familiar with it, those are the examples that might come to mind. And it creates some sort of fear. But what are some ways that you can use like automation? Know you already mentioned for following up, and how can you make that like more personable to remove that barrier?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just give an example. If your firm has taken the steps to get like an intake software system, right? Many of these systems may come with like default messages that are just kind of out of the box default messages that are used for follow up. I believe that maybe 80% of the firms that I've ever audited have never changed those messages before. They just kept the out of the box default message in there, which typically is, do you need help? Type Y for yes or N for no. And it's just so, it's just not personable. So, one thing that we recommend is including, especially for those that are injury related, how are you feeling? Add that into your automated template. I'm just checking in. I'm just checking in to see how are you feeling. We're here to help point you in the right direction. We're not just saying call us back because we want to see if you have a case. We're genuinely concerned. And when they call us back, it's a part of our call path. It's a part of our script. We're asking them, how are they feeling? Are they in pain? We want to also assess not only the injuries that they sustained and the treatment that they received, but do they need more treatment? So we want to take a moment to be present with them and just to check in. How are they feeling emotionally? How are they feeling physically? We know that you experienced something catastrophic. You reached out to us for help, and we wanted to help you. And we want to be empathetic, even from the automated follow ups. Another way that we can use automation to remain personable, and maybe this is not so much, like a personable tactic, but what we see often is that when a firm maybe, identifies a viable and valuable claim and sends out a sign up packet, they just don't hear back from that client again. And they're following up and that client is unresponsive. And then when we take a look at their packet, we realize this packet has 20 pages in here and they're having to type in all of the information that they've already provided to the attorney or the intake specialist. There's an opportunity there to map those fields, if you have an intake software system, into that document so that when they open it up, it's just shooting them straight to the lines where they need to sign. Because one, you should have already taken a moment to explain to them what the process is like, how the contingency fee, have they ever hired a personal injury attorney before? So when they open the packet, of course, they are able to review it, but they're not having to type in that information again. So that's another way they can automate the system to ensure that they're making it as easy as possible for the client. And it does feel more personable. If you're opening the
Mhm.
packet, don't feel like I already gave all of this information to this firm. Why am I having to do this again? But in a way, we can still personalize the experience by ensuring that we're removing all of that friction and making it as easy as possible for our clients to get legal representation for their injury matter.
Yeah, and I imagine by doing all that too, I mean, each interaction anybody has with your brand, your firm, that is your brand, each one of those touch points. So by reducing that friction, I'm assuming the result of that is also just happier clients, like real business stuff, like you're growing something that people are going to care about and tell their friends about. And the benefit of the amount of money and time you're going to save from staff labor hours by investing in this to just set it up the right way. Do you see like I mean, how does this affect staffing? All those things you touched on, I'm really nerded out over just because there's so
Yeah.
many efficiencies I can like see.
Yeah. I love this question because I'll be candid. When we start working with a law firm, we take a we take a different approach with the various departments that we work with. We typically start with an audit where we are conducting mystery shops, auditing their call handling, their intake systems, their overall potential client experience from A to Z. So when we come into the firm and we are now looking to streamline everything, there's a bit of change management because the maybe the intake team or some of the other team members feel like, oh boy, big brother's here. This is going to just create so much more work for us. Now we're going to have to do things differently. So there's a lot of education that goes into it up front for them to understand that we are here to ensure that you are seen as the most valuable player in this firm. You have you are the gatekeeper to ensure that we can leverage all of these potential clients to ensure that they can become another satisfied client for the
Mhm.
firm. Want to make your job as easy as possible to ensure that we're removing all of the friction. So as we start to streamline everything and track everything, one, they notice a huge uptick in the leads that are being tracked because we realized that a lot of these leads maybe weren't being entered into the system. And we've created these foolproof systems so that absolutely everything is deposited into their intake management system. Sometimes that creates a little bit of anxiety because they're thinking, oh my gosh, we're having all these, this increase in cases and leads. This is more work. But as we streamline the systems and we're checking in and we're coaching them on a weekly basis, what they realize and what we love to see is that they can do more faster, smarter. They're actually able to handle the increase in leads, the increase in cases without adding more work to their plate because it has streamlined and removed so much of the manual day-to-day processes that they were doing before. And that is probably my most favorite part of just the entire journey of optimizing, a law firm's intake system is seeing the team say, wow, I processed 40 more leads this month and signed up 30% more cases. And weirdly, I didn't feel like it added more work to my plate. It was actually easier. They can put more. You
Wow.
can put more. You can put more on their plate, right? When we streamline it. So I love that question because it's usually the biggest fear I think when we start working in a team that we have to address immediately is that this is going to make your life easier. And boy, I can't wait till you get to the other side and see that.
Sure. And I think, generally speaking, people they fear change, right? Or maybe they're coming from
Yeah.
my job or something when all you're really trying to do is empower them to get better and obviously help the firm get better. So, and have you ever worked with firms that are more established that don't have even a CRM, and kind of what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I have actually. So, especially the firms that have been around for a very long time, I like to call them legacy law firms.
Okay.
Maybe they've been around for over 80 years. They were sustained by referrals for a very long time, and they're maybe slow adopters to a lot of the technology and maybe even marketing because they didn't need it for a long time, but they need it to remain competitive today. And for those firms that maybe are still struggling with making the decision on letting go of control and, just really contemplating, can we really see a future where the attorney isn't vetting the leads or signing off on all of these leads? How can we ensure that this is going to be done the way that we would handle it? I always tell them it's going to be done better because
Mm,
they're not working, the intake team is not working those cases. They're available to follow up. They have more time to be present with these potential clients and to ensure that they're gathering all of the information. And you can focus on qualified clients, pre screened clients, and signed up clients. That's a
love
win
that.
for you. So I think that it comes for the firms that are still trying to figure out, should we get a CRM? One of the things that I also try to educate these firms on, and it takes time, and I'm so empathetic with a lot of the firms who are still, you know, getting their first CRM is, it's a lot to get an intake software system or even a case management system it's a whole new way of doing things. So we're very empathetic to that. But it's the only way to create a predictable and profitable law firm in today's
Mm,
time. It's just
yeah.
it's the only way. So there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts to creating a predictable and profitable law firm. It's going to take time. We're here to take the heavy lifting off of their plate. But there's no option these days. You just have to jump on or you get left behind. But it's something that is also very rewarding when you see a firm who was no intake team, no intake management system, and then you see 6 months later they're thriving in a just completely new reality. But
Mhm.
it's what makes us so excited.
Yeah. And, you know, technology has come a long way and it's rapidly changing right now, I think, as you're well aware. And, you know, you've mentioned a lot about, you know, CRMs or software and intake systems. Are there any just like favorite softwares that you would recommend right now? Or are there a lot that you work with?
Yeah. We have worked with most case management systems, intake management systems. You know, my time of working in the law firm as well, used a few. So right now we love Filevine. We love Lead Docket. It has, in our opinion, the most, intuitive end user experience, the most robust for reporting. However, you have to leverage it and you have to customize it to meet your needs as a firm. You really have to invest also into a software system. I think a lot of people think, and fairly, that if they are acquiring a software system like LeadDocket or Filevine, that it's going to solve every issue in their firm, right? It's
Just
going to
turn
be
it
the
on.
just turn it on. It's the magic solution, right? I went to this conference, they told me about it, I got everything that I needed. Why aren't all of these issues fixed? Why do I still feel like I'm in the dark? But you have to leverage the data from all of these various software systems. You have to build business intelligence to know what's working, what's not working, and that doesn't actually happen naturally. It doesn't just happen on its own. You have to ensure that the team members using those systems are using it the way that it's designed. One, that it's designed for your firm, and that somebody owns the data integrity to ensure that the data is accurate, that it's being entered the way that it needs to be to identify in real time when there is, I guess, a breach of protocol, where people aren't using it, things aren't going into the system, and that there's someone, again, that owns just analyzing this information so that we know what's working and what's not working. And then we use that information to lead our marketing efforts and to lead our teams. But it requires the firm to invest in growing it, in optimizing it. The system itself is a machine, but you still have to optimize it. So those two are my favorite. Right now we love to use Filevine, we love to use Lead Docket, and we help our clients with the implementation and customization of those systems as well.
And how do you tell if a law firm has an intake problem or a lead gen problem?
Mm-hmm. We love an audit. We love to do an audit. I will, if I'm meeting a law firm owner and we're talking about maybe some of their conversion issues. Typically, the issues that they present up front is our conversions are low. We used to do the intake as attorneys. Now we have an intake team. Our conversions are low. And they may also mention that we've added all of this money to our marketing and our cases aren't going up. So where what's going on? We have to figure out these issues. It's a conversion issues. But so they understand that it's intake related at some degree, but we're honest and we typically don't partner with a law firm until we do a complete audit. And our audits are 3.5 to 4 weeks long. We take a look at absolutely everything. And yes, we sign NDAs before we start as well because we need access to absolutely everything. And we conduct mystery shops using various, case types, personas, extensive research within your geographical area for response times on all of your contact methods, call in, web chat, call in, web forms. And we do the same with your competitors. We compare how long it took your firm to respond versus their firm. What's your sign up process versus their sign up process, your customer experience versus theirs. We take a deep dive into lead docket to see what did it look like behind the scenes, what kind of notes were being taken,
Hmm.
right? While they were following up with these mystery shop prospects. How were the lead statuses utilized during that time? How were the documents sent out? Where's the friction in that? We look at the data, the setup, everything, even how it's mapped over in their case management system, if they have it set up, absolutely everything. And usually it ends up being about 75 to 100 pages. And I do
Wow.
not actually provide a true answer on whether it's lead supply or an intake issue until I do an audit. And then at that point, if it's a lead supply issue, I say you don't need to work with us. You just need to work on, your marketing vendors at that point and, build your business intelligence so that you feel confident about holding them accountable. But if it's an intake issue, then they have all of the answers or the core answers in this report to take care of it themselves, or they can choose to work with us in order for us to partner with them through the entire process. So we typically can only confirm if it's an intake problem or a lead problem if we audit. It's hard to tell if we don't.
Fair enough. Yeah, and it sounds like that you kind of do an end-to-end solution, and there's a lot of different things that can happen along the way there. Have you seen valuable cases get missed or thrown out during that audit before? Is that common?
Yeah, I have. And there are so many reasons why that can happen. And this is why quality control is so important. And I love that the legal industry is talking about quality control right now. I'm seeing the conversation trending more and more every day. The most common reasons that we see a valuable case kind of just fall through the cracks is maybe the integration wasn't set up between the website and the intake system,
Mm.
right? And they just one day they just realized, wait a minute, we are getting these emails still in this inbox, and of course it's still going to, a lead docket system, and they didn't realize at any point that it stopped. So we've seen that. Sometimes it's like a technology issue. So there should be quality control in place where we're testing our integrations on a biweekly basis. Things do happen. Another reason that we see some of these cases fall through the gaps is, again, data integrity, ensuring that everyone's following processes. We've seen other scenarios where we have called with a stellar case. It's an A case, and for personal injury, the call was handled great. But maybe it was Friday, an hour before they closed, and the intake specialist is excited to start the weekend as they should be. But they maybe wrote it down on a legal pad and said, on Monday, I'll send out the agreement. And then we waited for Monday, and Monday, we didn't get the agreement. And then Tuesday came and Wednesday came. And what happens is that out of sight, out of mind. If it's not in the system, if it's not properly in its correct status, you have to rely on your memory, right, to send this out. What happens on Monday? You get something else thrown on you. Things come up.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we see a lot of reasons why cases fall through the gaps. And sometimes it's just common human error, like not entering it into the system and just being so confident that you're going to be able to remember it before you leave for the day, or that you're going to get to it on Monday, which is too long still, an integration issue. And another is lack of training within the intake team. We've also heard calls where an intake specialist was fairly new. Fortunately, didn't have a lot of legal experience, knew that there was a personal injury firm. Somehow, during the training process, they happened to have gotten a wrongful death case like the next day after their first or second training. And they told the caller, we do not handle wrongful deaths.
Oh.
Whoa,
Mm.
whoa,
Yikes.
whoa. So there's also something to be said about ensuring that intake specialists are ready, right? Before we put them on the phone when we're training them, and if they don't have previous experience. And, a lot of that has to do with understanding that we have to invest time, we have to invest resources into creating a stellar intake team. But I think that sometimes it can be assumed like it's easy. Anyone can do it. You put them in that position and they fumble, right? When given an opportunity like, do you guys handle wrongful deaths? So those are some reasons that we've seen when while conducting an intake audit for a firm.
Got it. I mean, it sounds like you've seen it all. And I think every firm owner can relate to, seeing a case go out the window as being a problem and noting that they need to change something. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, Yanni, you've provided us with so many nuggets of information. I'm just so thankful for all of the knowledge that you've shared, all the knowledge bombs that you dropped here. What would you say to people that think they may need to talk to somebody very intelligent like yourself to get their intake systems in order? And how can legal intake pros help them?
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And, I think anyone that is not sure if they need help, which is usually the case, I think they're just not sure. Is it a lead supply issue? If it's an intake issue, I'm not going to sit here and say you definitely have an intake problem. Just start with an audit. Just find out if there is an issue. And if there isn't an issue, then um, congratulations, congratulations. And you know what you need to focus on next. And then if they do have an intake problem, then we're here to help them every step of the way. I'll just wrap up with saying this that with, when I was working inside of a high volume law firm, I was so busy. I was wearing a lot of hats. I had a lot of pressure. I was, it would keep me up at night. Why aren't we signing up more cases? I was so obsessed with lead supply. And when I realized that there were some issues with intake, I was constantly researching solutions that would um, help us by sticking with us through the entire process because we were so busy. I wanted like a done for you solution where it was more of a partnership. And I didn't find that. I found short-term partnerships and I realized that it was going to be up to me to figure it out through trial and error. And it was a long process, but I became very passionate about that. So when I build an intake optimization program and when I launch Legal Intake Pros, I keep that in mind is that it's really hard to work on your law firm when you're so busy working in your law firm. So what we do is we take that off of law firm owners' plates, marketing directors' plates, so that
Mhm.
we collaborate with them, but we are doing all of the heavy lifting because I know that listening to all of this is like, yeah, okay, but we'll add it in like our 3-year plan. We don't have time, we don't have someone internally to handle that. I get it. I have been there. So, we help with audits, setting up your intake softwares, optimizing that. We help with the intake training for the teams. It's a long-term process. Again, no shortcuts to creating a predictable and profitable firm. So we're meeting with intake team members for every single week for the first 3 months. Then we move into a biweekly check-in, but we're monitoring all of the calls. We're looking at all the leads. We are taking that first time audit and we are putting it into practice every single week. So there's also firms that eventually maybe spend a year or two in the program and then they move into quality control. And at that point, we just continue to monitor and score their calls and their dashboards. And then we send them the scorecards because they might have someone in their team now that can just take that information to then lead the team. And they may not have the 6-7 hours a week to listen to their calls and to audit their dashboards and every single interaction. So, we're excited for all of those firms that are ready to take the step into getting their house in order, right? To ensure that they're getting the most out of their marketing, the technology they've invested in, the team members that they've hired, and just excited for 2024 and any firm that wants to work together. We'd love to chat.
Well, that's awesome. And what's your website for those that want to find you that way?
Yeah. So you can find us at legalintakepros.com. And we're also Legal Intake Pros on all socials. So social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and others.
Awesome. Well, Yanni, again, thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to have to do a follow up because I only got through like half of the questions that I wrote down. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more after this. But again, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for joining us on the Mastermind podcast.
Thanks, Casey.